following program is intended for mature audiences.
A democratic republic of sports. The Sportsocracy with ESPN Asheville hosts Tank Spencer and Jeremy Greene.
Welcome into the Wicked Weed studio. I'm Tank Spencer, Jeremy Greene alongside. Don't forget to check out our friends at wickedweedbrewing.com. Wicked Weed Brewing, drink different. And speaking of different, this is a different little bit of exercise than we've ever done before. It's an expansion draft in the NFL. The last one of these we had was with the Houston Texans.
In 2002.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So anyhow, of course, the NHL going through their expansion draft with the Seattle Kraken. Guess what? We had something that fit perfectly into this little slot, as we're going to have a 33rd team on NFLDraft.net, the new website that is going to be debuting pretty soon in this football season, before the college football season starts.
It'll be college football weekend.
Okay.
So college football weekend, NFLDraft.net will be all of my player profiles. I've got different guys writing different things. We're going to do some different shit. This will be a website for the draft purist at heart. And we're going to do all these just weird things. Like this. Right. I've always said that if I had the ability to slot in as an NFL team and just pick the players that I was the drunkest on at a net spot, I think I could build a hell of a roster over time. So he challenged me to do that.
Yeah, time to put your money where your mouth is. So the 33rd team on NFLDraft.net is going to be the West Virginia Ninjas. And this is the reveal of the expansion draft for the West Virginia Ninjas. Explain to us, Jeremy, how an expansion draft in the NFL would work.
Okay, so the last one we did was in 2002 with the Houston Texans. Every team had to expose 5 players that the Texans were allowed to pick. If the Texans took a player from that team, they were allowed to pull one of their players back, still leaving 2 exposed. If the Texans took a second player, they were allowed to pull the last player back, and then they would be done. So the intention was to not have more than 2 players come off any team. Mm-hmm. Well, we did. The Jaguars and the Jets both had 3 players taken. So we're after free agency, we're after the draft, we're after all the things, but today is the day that the Kraken are doing their draft in the NHL, so this was the day we wanted to launch this. So we revised the rules a little bit. Carter Donnick, who is a writer for the draftnetwork.com, did an exercise that was just perfectly timed because it gave us a player pool. What we couldn't figure out was, how are we going to pull a player pool that there's no bias?
Right.
We do not know Carter Donnick. I asked his permission to use his things because that's what civilized people do. So he has created a pool. His rules are a little different than mine, so I've even tinkered it a little bit. He's got between a 7 and 10 player pool for every team of unprotected players. I am refusing to draft anyone that was signed this year, anyone that was drafted this year, or anyone that's not signed for 2022. So their contract cannot expire after this year. That's usually one of the terms of an expansion draft. It's just into this offseason. Well, the offseason's already happened. Mm-hmm. So I will be drafting no expiring free agents. That was another way that I kind of culled the pool down. And so the first step that we had to do was hire a coach. Mm-hmm. And we did that this morning in the Sportsocracy, live 10 a.m. right here on YouTube every weekday, brought to you by Wicked Weed Brewing. And we had 3 great candidates. I called Eric Bieniemy. He did not want the job because he will have his choice of any job in the NFL he wants. And Matt Campbell of Iowa State basically told me the same thing. So I was down to 2 candidates, which was Byron Leftwich and the guy I ultimately picked, Joe Brady of the Carolina Panthers. I figure he's a young enough guy. He might be willing to grow with an expansion franchise. I feel like plus we're in the Charlotte market. That didn't hurt anything either. We're an affiliate for the Carolina Panthers. So that was kind of the tiebreaker, because I'm not going to lie, I wanted Leftwich, but I don't know him as well, and I don't know what his staff would look like.
Right.
Joe Brady, I got a pretty damn good idea of what his staff would look like. We will do a video in the coming weeks of what the staff is going to look like. We'll also do the players that I'm taking from the draft. Mm-hmm. This year, I'm doing what the Texans did. I get the number 1 pick in every round. So I will be picking 7 rookies. It's my 7 favorite rookies that were on the board when the draft came along. Every year moving forward, I will pick in between 16 and 17. So I won't have the shot at the Trevor Lawrences and the high-end draftable guys, but I will get to pick the guys that I've been just drunk on. This is the Chase Claypools, the Michael Pittmans. Those are the ones from last year. From this year, it'll be the guys you see on the screen. So I can't tip those off if you don't watch our show regularly.
Right.
I'll also be doing undrafted free agents. The rule this year in undrafted free agency, I have an unlimited player pool. I don't have any futures contracts. I don't have any of those things. And let's be really honest, you wouldn't know who they were anyway. Nerds like me, I know who half of them are,
right.
Which means maybe there are 4 people on the planet Earth that would know who all of them were. So we figured this is a draft exercise. It's going on our draft website. So we will use undrafted free agents.
So tell us about your player pool and how you decided who to pull from what team. Like, can you give us an example of some of the guys that were in consideration maybe that didn't make the roster?
There were a few that he had in the pool because his was a little narrow. So a guy like Van Jefferson from the Rams ended up in his player pool. Well, obviously I would have taken him, but I don't think that would have ever happened. I tried to keep this as realistic as humanly possible while still being entertaining for the casual NFL fan. So there are players that those will predominantly be the first 7. And then there's a lot of depth guys. I took a lot of offensive linemen, and we bunched those all together, and we'll kind of shoot through that just to build a roster, and we'll keep rolling through with this until all the way through the season. Yeah. So I will make moves, I will make trades. We have beat writers from different NFL teams that I'm going to reach out to over the season and opine trades and things like that. When guys get cut, I will have first waiver priority for the first year. So if somebody's cut, I can add them to my roster this year. After this year, I will have the in between the 16th and 17th waiver priority. So mine would technically be 17, but I will fit in between those two. So if a player makes it to one of the back half teams, I can claim them. If they don't, I can't.
All right, well, let's get into it. The number 1 pick in the 2021 NFL Imaginary expansion draft for the West Virginia Ninjas.
I looked at this as I need a leader of my defense. Since I have the number 1 pick in the draft, I know I'm going to be getting a quarterback. I'll give you one guess as to who it is.
Zach Wilson. We know.
I do love Zach Wilson. So I need a leader of my defense. There were not a ton of those guys out there, but there was one that stood out to me, and I will be making him the first official player of the West Virginia Ninjas, and that player is Jordan Hicks of the Arizona Cardinals. This is a guy they've tried to move in the offseason. I really like this guy. Came from Philadelphia. Just a really solid linebacker all the way around. Been in the league for 6 years. I think he can be the stalwart of my defense. That's my defensive play caller. I went all the way down the list and I went, that's the guy. That's my number 1 guy. May not be the most talented player you see me select here,
right,
but he's the guy that can call my defense. He can be my golden-haired Clemson quarterback of my defense. Trying not to tip off who my pick will be, although we all already know. So, yeah, my first pick, Jordan Hicks, inside linebacker, Arizona Cardinals.
All right, that's not a bad start. You need a defensive cornerstone to every team. I'm sure you did all your due diligence taking all of the offensive linemen that can create a great team down in the trenches.
Oh, I have. They're
starting off. I was going to say, starting off with a quarterback of the defense is not horrible.
I just really like this guy. I know he plays outside linebacker in a 4-3. I think he can be my inside linebacker in a 3-4, which is what I will be playing, and you will see some pieces of that being added to the team very shortly.
All right, the number 2 pick for the West Virginia Ninjas.
This was the most, you'll notice a theme. Slightly overpaid young guys that maybe got that second contract, whatever happened, they've fallen out of favor with their team. I will give them the opportunity. With the second pick in the 2021 NFL expansion draft for the West Virginia Ninjas, I select a guy you're real familiar with, O.J. Howard,
yeah.
Tight end, Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Now, I just hope to God you're going to use him. He's been completely wasted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's been one of the things that I've hated about this franchise for the last, 4 years now that he's been in the league? He's been completely misused. He's got a great future if he ever lands with a team that is actually going to utilize all of his talents.
I'm that team.
Good for
I
you.
love this kid coming out, and that's going to be what a lot of this is. You'll see a lot of guys that I saw them on the list. I evaluated them in my past doing, NFL draft profiles and things like that. O.J. Howard was a guy that I was just drunk on. There haven't been many tight ends that have ever come out that I had rated higher than him. And seeing him here, I know things haven't gone exactly well in Tampa Bay. Do you know how many catches he has in his career?
No.
It's 105. He has 105 catches for 1,602 yards and 14 touchdowns.
I mean, he has been hurt.
I understand that. He's been hurt pretty much every year, but he's been an afterthought for this team. He can be he's going to be my one. He'll be my move tight end. I have another, for a later video, I have another tight end that I'm going to add to this roster.
This also makes the fake fan in me, though, upset because, goddammit, we should have got something out of him.
Well,
we should have been able to trade him or something. Don't lose him in an expansion draft for nothing.
Well, you did. You lost him to me. He was one of the player pulled for the Buccaneers. He's also the only player I pulled from the Bucs. In this exercise, Donnick had them putting out, like Antonio Brown was in this. I don't think they would have done that. They might have because they're killed up against the cap. This is a lot of times a place that teams will send just god-awful contracts, which I'm trying to stay away. I'm trying my best I can to stay away from that.
Donovan Smith.
He was in it too. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I'm good. I saw that. I saw the name and I went, huh, oh, that's a guy. I'm just going to go over here. I guess I'm good. I don't want
Would you like to overpay for this guy?
William Golston, another guy that was in it. And nah.
Yeah, he's cast off.
Yeah, I'm good. Leonard Fournette. No, I'm good.
No,
However, I do need a running back. And my coach does run a kind of funky little system that he likes little gadget guys. There is a gadget guy that's out there that I've always said, if paired with the right running back, could be a hell of a little piece in the NFL.
Well, let's just see who the number 3 pick in the 2021 NFL expansion draft is for the West Virginia Ninjas.
Tariq Cohen. This is a guy I think I can put back returning punts. He's going to be a gadget player. My intention is to use him much in the Darren Sproles role. He's not much of a blocker, but in Coach Brady's system, he's enough of a piece, he's enough of a weapon out of the backfield that I think paired with a RB1, he can be a really good piece for my team. I did a lot in bolstering my special teams. So having a guy like Tariq Cohen, you'll see a couple more special teamer picks before this is over. But Tariq Cohen was a guy that just screamed to me. The Bears didn't have a whole lot that I was super interested in. Guys that I took Tariq Cohen over, Mario Edwards Jr. Yeah, I mean, I like him a little bit. Not a contract I really wanted to take on. I think I can draft those guys over time. This draft is really deep in guys that I think can play on the line in my 3-4. He's not a traditional nose. So, I'm not paying that much for a 3-4 end at this point. I have literally 50 other holes to fill. So, not doing that quite yet with any of the other players for the Bears.
All right, let's go with the 4th pick in the expansion draft.
This will be a name you're quite familiar with if you watch our show. Auden Tate, wide receiver, Cincinnati Bengals.
The one guy that you could never not mention in a Cincinnati Bengals video, except for the one time that Brian and I made a bet that you would bring up his name. It's the only video about the Cincinnati Bengals that you haven't talked about.
I can't quit him. He completes me. I loved him at Florida State. I love him now. I like big receivers. That's one thing I think Joe Brady has missed in his 1 year in Carolina, is having a big-bodied receiver. He's not crazy athletic, but he's a red zone target. And knowing that I'm going to have a young tight end, having a big outside receiver like Auden Tate, who's only, I want to say he's only 25 years old. I saw the name, I couldn't pass it up. The Bengals didn't, shockingly enough, have a lot that I was superiorly interested in. However, did I pass on Drew Sample? But Auden Tate was a guy that just jumped out to me. That's to me, that's a piece that I think he can be a 2 for me long term. One thing the Bengals are rich in is wide receivers, so they left Auden Tate unprotected, and I happily scooped him up for the West Virginia Ninjas.
At number 5 in the expansion draft.
A young quarterback's best friend. I was a little shocked to see this guy out here, but he is one of the highest paid centers in the NFL. With the 5th pick, I will happily take Ben Jones, center from the Tennessee Titans.
You know I'm a big fan of this one.
Because you like linemen. And there's a lot of those in here, so don't worry. I really feel like there were just certain things I had to come away from this draft with. And one of them is I need a veteran center. There are centers that I like in the draft. I think there are guys I could go get that wouldn't cost me too tremendously much. But Ben Jones is a vet guy. I know what I'm getting. This is a guy that can help my young quarterback, line calls, things like that. With him playing center, I'm willing to pay, and I want to say he makes $7 or $8 million a year.
7.25.
I'm fine with that. That's fine. At center, I'm perfectly okay to pay that. I'm okay to pay it for Jordan Hicks. Guys that are going to help the system work for me, I'm totally in. Ben Jones is a guy that I really like. With us being close to the Nashville market, I know this team pretty well. That name screamed out to me. The only Tennessee Titan that I take in this little adventure.
I don't just like offensive linemen. I really like offensive linemen who went to Georgia.
Yeah.
That's the connection with Ben Jones.
Yeah, there were a lot of
great pick.
There were a lot of with the Titans. A lot of the ones that Carter Donnick put in the story were guys that I couldn't touch. So it made it even easier that most of the other guys violated my rules. So I saw Ben Jones and I went, he doesn't. I'll take him.
All right, number 6 in the 2021 expansion draft, imaginary expansion draft, for the new 33rd team in the NFL, according to NFLDraft.net, coming soon to a web browser near you. Number 6.
This is another guy I'm paying a little bit of money to, but I think he can be a valuable piece in my defense. Dietrich Wise. Edge, New England Patriots.
That's a big old dude.
That's a big old dude. And this is a guy that has experience in the defense that I'm planning on running. He comes from the Belichickian system, and that's where he fits. I know that he does cost a little bit. I got a lot of money to play with, and I know that the salary cap's going up next year. So there will be a few places that I'm okay to spend the money. Dietrich Wise is a guy that I think the intelligence, the know-how, the vet leadership, another guy on my defense that I'm not starting 11 rookies. The thing you got to realize with this exercise is I'm probably going to have 50 rookies on my roster. So any place that I can get a guy that I know is a lockdown starter, that's somewhere I'm going to go. New England also exposed Sony Michel, a few other guys that I just wasn't interested in. So Dietrich Wise was a pretty easy selection for my choice from the New England Patriots.
All right, number 7 for the West Virginia Ninjas.
A man with hair like mine cannot possibly go through this experience and not take the original. Gardner Minshew. I know I'm going to be taking a rookie quarterback.
Okay.
I know I'm going to be starting a rookie quarterback. Jacksonville exposed Gardner because they did not believe he was a veteran presence. He was too liked, all those things. I'm not worried about that. I love Gardner Minshew. I think he's a fantastic backup quarterback in the NFL. And if my rookie's not ready, he's a guy I know can come in and start games. I wanted to come away from this with a quarterback of some kind. Guys that were exposed in this, Ben Roethlisberger was exposed in this, Jimmy Garoppolo was exposed in this. They're all just numbers that I don't want to take on. I have the number 1 pick in the draft, and there's a generational talent in it. I'm not going to stick him behind one of those guys, and I'm not going to stick one of those guys behind him. It just doesn't make any sense. So I get a value in a guy that started some games. I know, no matter what, if for nothing else, he's a lighthearted presence in the quarterback room, and he's a guy that started games. So, I've got experience. I've got all the things on my side with Gardner Minshew that makes him the perfect number 7 pick for the West Virginia Ninjas in our expansion draft.
All right, so let's talk about your position or your skill players here that you've got so far. You've got Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew will be throwing to Auden Tate, O.J. Howard, He's got Tariq Cohen to play with as well.
Yes.
You feel real solid about that being the start of a franchise.
I feel really solid about that, about those being guys that have a role. Here's the thing you got to understand. I'm going to be able to go through free agency. So and the way free agency is going to work for this is I'm going to have to overpay by 10% for any free agent I sign. So I take the NFL contract that they sign, I add 10% to it, and that's what I have to sign them for.
Okay.
So that's how free agency works. I'm not saying that these guys are going to be starters. Frankly, I think they're all going to be backups. But I haven't spent a tremendous amount of money, so I'm going to be able to go out in the trade market and make deals with conditional picks. I'll be able to maneuver around in the draft because I have 2 really sought-after picks, which I don't really intend on taking either one of them. Do with that what you will.
Okay.
This first pick of the second round, you got teams that sit on this for a day.
Yeah.
And so you know that there will be teams that are willing to come off things. I just feel like I can build my roster. Here's what I feel like I have with the 7 guys I've started with. These are all guys that I feel like are going to have a role. Do I have a Ryan Young like the Texans did that I know from day one can start at right tackle? I don't yet, but there are a couple guys coming that I think can slide into that. But I feel like my Ryan Young is Ben Jones. That's the guy that could be the stalwart of my offensive line. He's good enough, experienced enough. I feel like all the guys that I've taken have a role, and I'm not just pissing in the wind shooting salary cap space.
No.
Every one of these guys is young enough, and I feel like has either not gotten a full chance where they are, or they bring an experience level that will help what is going to be an incredibly young roster.
All right, we know Gardner Minshew is not going to be your starting quarterback. You have the number 1 pick in the draft. You're going to take one of the top quarterbacks. We won't reveal who. Anyhow, now we get deeper into the draft. Here comes the names that you may not know as much, so we're not going to go over these individually. Number 8.
We'll hit the high notes.
Right. Hit the high notes here. Number 8 pick.
Dean Lowry from the Green Bay Packers. It's another vet guy, another guy that makes a little bit of money, another guy that I was a little bit shocked to see in the pool. You'll see that I did the same thing at number 11 with Brent Urban. These are just guys that are going to be rotational pieces. This keeps me from having to reach in the draft. And that's pretty much with the set of 8 picks you see right here, the set of 8 picks, which will be the final 8 picks. I only took 23 players in the expansion draft. I have to, the way the expansion draft works, you either have to take 30 players or you have to take 17.5% of the salary cap. I will have done 17.5% standing on my head. So I don't want to add too many guys that are being cast off by other teams. I cherry-picked everything. I'm willing to take the risk with some contracts like Dean Lowry's. I just think he fits. At number 9, I took Mackenzie Alexander from the Minnesota Vikings. He was a guy I liked coming out of Clemson. I think there's raw talent there. He just might need to be in a different place.
That's a quality pick.
I agree. He doesn't really have a ton of a role in Minnesota because they've, with Jeff Gladney and all the other players that they've drafted over the last couple of years to fulfill that defense for Mike Zimmer. But he can land right here, and I'm totally fine with it. At number 10, I take Cameron Curl, safety from the Washington football team, kind of a hybrid corner safety kind of guy that he's going to have a role. If for nothing else, he's a hell of a special teamer for me, which is what I'm looking for here. I want guys that are going to make the roster because I'm not going to have a lot of cracks at veterans. You know, with the rule of 10% on every free agent, I'm really going to be specific about the free agents I chase. I'm going to take advantage of the undrafted free agent pool where there is no limit on how much money I can spend for this 1 year, and knowing that I only get 1 mulligan year. So I have to take advantage of the system the way that it's put before me. So Brent Urban, like I said, another rotational piece. Levi Wallace, I fully plan on being a starter for me on the outside. Buffalo exposed him because they have some young guys that they feel like, you know, maybe they don't have to pay the deal with Levi Wallace. I'm totally fine with it. I'll put him on the outside. He's got the length. He's got the scheme versatility. I can do a lot of things with Levi Wallace. Pretty excited about him. Preston Williams at 13 from the Miami Dolphins. A guy that I've seen flashes of. He has injury problems, but he's really cheap. You know, Miami brought in Jalen Waddle. Miami brought in Will Fuller. There was just not a place for Preston Williams. They exposed him hoping, you know, since they had to expose 10 players that I would take him. Well, I will happily acquiesce. A.J. Johnson. Alexander Johnson from the Denver Broncos. That's a guy that I am very excited about. That's one of those players that I think the tape jumps on him and people just don't know who he is. He's kind of nameless in that defense, and I'll happily put him next to Jordan Hicks. I feel like now I am dead set at inside linebacker. I'm going to want another veteran piece, but this is a good tackling linebacker with experience, not too overpaid, that I can just pencil in. This is one of the vets that's going to make my roster, and I'm totally fine with it. With the last pick in this set, Zach Banner from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here's the thing. They believe in him, and there's not a lot of linemen out here. You know, I didn't do this to pander to viewers. If there had been offensive linemen, I would have taken them.
Yeah.
The next page has more linemen, but there's just not a lot of guys out there that I'm totally sold on. Zach Banner's a guy that I know, whether it's at right tackle, whether I slide him in at guard, whether I'm forced to play him at left tackle. I don't love the idea of playing him there, but I will if I have to. This is a young team. And I've already said that I'm going to play a lot. There's going to be a lot of 2 tight ends. I'm going to have an inline tight end at some point. I can protect him if I need to. But Zach Banner, to me, was one of the best tackles on the board.
So far in this exercise, in the expansion draft, you only have, what, is it 3 guys in your first 15 picks here that make $6 million or more?
I tried to stay away from the big contracts. I mean, and there are a lot of guys out there like that. I already talked about the quarterbacks. There are a lot of what could be considered lesser signings that I could have, but I don't want to take somebody else's mistake. If I'm going to make a mistake, I would rather make my own mistake, where I go out, guy was a free agent, I overpay for him. Like I said, that's the rule.
Yep.
I would rather do that. So I will, for a guy that's got the experience, you know, I paid more for Ben Jones. I paid more for a few other guys, but there was a specific reason. I wanted to spend my money in a smart way. One of the things that I think screwed the Houston Texans from the jump was that they went, you know, Tony Baselli, Aaron Glenn. So they were really top heavy. I want to save my money to be able to fill holes. You know, I want to be able to go into the draft. I want to have a little bit of everything. When I come up on the clock at 33 in the second round, I don't want to be looking at a hole on my roster going, I don't have a guy here.
Right.
Every one of these guys has the ability, if I need them to play, they can all play. And that was my rule going into this, is if you don't have a rule, if you don't have a role, I'm not going to take you. If you're paid, I would say 20 to 30% more than I think you're worth, I also took you off my board.
All right, so we are down to the 16th pick in the 2021 Imaginary Expansion Draft for the West Virginia Ninjas. Let's see the next batch of picks.
At 16, I take Matt Pert from the New York Giants. This is a guy out of St. John's that I really liked coming out. I was a little shocked to see him. Didn't have a great rookie year, but it was good enough that I happily take him right here.
Right.
I saw him as a guard when he came out. I listed him as a tackle because that's what the Giants listed him at. That's what NFL.com lists him at, so that's how I listed him. He's a guy I'm familiar with because I did scout him. I watched this is a guy that I said a lot about in the pre-draft process. He fell a little bit, which shocked me to a point. And I said St. John's. I confused him with Ben Barch. Matt Pert is the one out of UConn.
Right.
But he's still a young guy. Big guy, third-round pick just a couple years ago. And for me, I look at him and Zach Banner and go, if they're my tackles going into the season, I could do worse. I could have done markedly worse.
I think this is what I was waiting on to see Joe Brady go out and convince the front office to get one of his guys
he's comfortable
from
with.
The Carolina Panthers.
The only team in the NFL that I took 2 players from is the Carolina Panthers because that's where Coach Brady came from. David Moore knows this system. That's a guy in the receiver room. This is a little bit different of a system. It's very pick and pop, very spready, and David Moore knows the system. He spent a year in it. Very few guys that I have the ability to get have as intricate of a knowledge of this offense as David Moore does. So for me, he was definitely somebody that I targeted at number 17. At 18, I took Lonnie Johnson Jr., cornerback from the Houston Texans, another guy that I scouted coming out of Kentucky. There's been some bad, but the tape on him is still good enough that I think there's unfound potential with him that I can bring out. And if you've noticed, I've gone not corner heavy, but I've got a few. I'm basically with these guys, at the very worst, Lonnie Johnson is a number 4 corner that can sit behind a rookie, another guy that's been in the league that has a voice in the cornerback room. At number 19, this is a guy I can't believe Kansas City exposed. I said it was a mistake. When they took him, they've overhauled the entire offensive line, Lucas Niang.
Yeah, he gets left out.
I'm going to find a place for him. I mean, this guy's not been in the league for 14 minutes, so I'm going to find a place for him. I understand why they exposed him. Things haven't gone well. He hasn't been particularly good. He hasn't looked good in practices, and injuries.
Yeah.
So, but he's a guy I'm willing to take a shot on. I have him under team control for several years, and you never know. With the 19th pick in the expansion draft, I may have hit a guy that starts for me for 5 or 6 years.
He's a guy that I would have liked to have seen play last year because he opted out of the season. He did opt out. So it's kind of an unknown right now. But I in the draft
the unknown
process,
with him is that you don't know how much of what was reported last year was true. There was a lot of there were reservations about this pick within the building, which is weird for Kansas City. I thought they took him too high, but as I say on the show all the time, every player has a value.
Indeed.
And at this point, at number 19, a guy that's 23 years old and can play offensive line in the league, I'm going to take the lottery ticket that Kansas City is willing to give up.
Now, do you hope that he is going to be your left tackle or right tackle?
My hopes he's my left tackle.
Okay.
If he's not, at worst, I can slide him in at guard and play Matt Purd at right tackle. Or I could go out and sign a guy. This is not a crazy deep offensive line free agency class. I like pieces of the draft on the offensive line. I just feel like with the number of guys that I've added here, I'm going in with a vet base that I don't have to overpay a guy. I feel like I've got 3 pieces here that I know I can play somewhere on the offensive line in Banner, Pert, and Niang. It's just a question of where do they slide in.
All right, at number 20 in the expansion draft, Nathan Shepard, the defensive tackle from the New York Jets.
This is a guy that I'm very comfortable with because being a Jets fan, I've watched him a lot. I didn't love a lot of what was exposed by the Jets, and like I said, you can see the article in the comments from Carter Donnick where he did the legwork for me on this, and I just cherry picked the players that he exposed. I don't know what to. A few of his guys didn't qualify for this exercise. That's a damn. Who's shocked that I don't remember the word exercise? A lot of
Who's
the guys.
shocked that I do?
That is shocking. A lot of the guys that he left exposed for this exercise either didn't qualify, but Nathan Shepard was the shining light to me. He's a guy that I think can come in and play D-end in that 3-4. He's got a little bit of an ability to pass rush. The stats don't jump off the page, but he's been a guy that, watching as many Jet games as I have, as much Jet film as I have, he jumps off the page, and he's a guy I'm very glad to get here at number 20 in the expansion draft.
At number 21, you got Tyler Davison, the defensive tackle from the Atlanta Falcons.
This is another vet guy. Obviously I have to pay him a little bit. He's a real big boy, 6'2", 310. I think there's a possibility he can slide into the middle of my defense. You're not going to get much from him as a pass rusher, but I think you can get something as a lane clogger. Worst case scenario, he's a 3-4 end. Best case scenario, maybe he bulks up a little bit and I can play him on the inside. I think he has the ability to do that. I don't know that, but I think that, and there are absolutely no definitive nose tackles in this draft. So, running a 3-4, I needed to come away with somebody that I thought I could put there, worst case scenario.
All right, and then you're adding another linebacker. This is the third one.
Yeah, that's these last 2 picks are special teams picks.
Okay.
Jalen Reeves-Maben is a guy that I know I can run on special teams. He's going to be a tackling machine for me on special teams. A little surprised Detroit exposed him, but I was happy to grab him up. And Trenton Cannon, obviously a guy that Coach Brady's familiar with from Carolina. Also a guy I'm familiar with from his days with the Jets. Another guy that can be a kick returner, one of the fastest running backs in the league, and a very good gunner on special teams. So I get a little special teams depth. Like I said at the beginning, the guys I take here, worst case scenario, they're going to play on special teams for me. I don't want to take a guy in this draft and then have to cut them. Because, see, the way this works is any of the bonuses and things like that, when I take them, I'm on the hook for them. So if they have bonuses and I cut them, I end up with the dead cap. Well, I have a very clean ledger right now. I plan on keeping it that way. I don't want to wind up with dead money and things like that. So I didn't take many of those guys that I fear that I know they have a role if they're on this team.
So the first 23 players of the West Virginia Ninjas have been revealed. The 2021 Imaginary Expansion Draft for the West Virginia Ninjas. Obviously, again, the Ninjas going to be featured on NFLDraft.net this upcoming season as the 33rd franchise in the NFL. You feel pretty good about where you sit?
I do. I'm looking at what I've got here. There's not really a position group that I feel like I completely neglected. I'm obviously going to need a little bit more on the offensive line. I'm going to need a couple safeties. I feel like the safety class this year is deep enough in the NFL draft that I can get a couple of those guys. There were a couple guys that had bad combines, whatever the case may be, that I believe will fall. And, you know, with a series of undrafted free agent money, you're going to see me bring in a lot of guys that I felt really good about.
Yep, that's going to be a whole lot of guys that you may not know, but in a couple of years they may be great role players.
Correct, and that's how this is going to roll. So, you know, my next adventure is into free agency. My objective is to sign 4 to 5 starters in free agency, just guys that, you know, and I'm not going to go big game hunting. You know, I know we're not going to be good this year. The objective is not to put wins on the board. It's to get the draft picks right. Above all else, I want to hit my draft picks. 5 out of the 7, I need to be really solid. I need to hit a couple undrafted free agents that can be role players for the team. I need role players here out of the expansion draft, and I need to hit a couple doubles or triples in free agency. If I can do that, I will go into next year with a roster that is, I'm not going to say a contender, but I'm putting something around my 6'6" rookie quarterback that won't, you know, it'll make life a little bit easier on him.
Right.
It's a slow roll. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I don't have to be, you know, 11-6 this year. Frankly, I know I'm not going to be. You know, my objective is just a few wins, couple hits, couple guys that show out. Hey,
Not with this team.
give it time. Just give it time.
I'm saying in real life, if you went in with this as your expansion team, you're kind of hampering yourself with the way that you're going to do this with the draft next year, because this is a team that would be picking at the top 3 next year.
And that's fine.
And
that's fine. You know, this is how I would do this if this was a real life team. So, you know, I got veterans at every position group. I've got somebody in the room for every position group. Now, you know, I didn't take any bad contracts, so I can go out in free agency, add some more talented starters. Go, like I said, come away from free agency with 4 to 5 starters, 3 to 4 starters out of the draft, 5 if I'm lucky, and maybe catch a, you know, lightning in a bottle and a couple undrafted guys.
Yeah, you got a whole lot of money to play with and a whole lot of draft picks to come as well.
Yes, I do.
And we'll be revealing those in an upcoming video here in the Sportsocracy. The West Virginia Ninjas, again, going to be featured as the 33rd team in the NFL on NFLDraft.net, coming soon to your web browser.